You know, when it comes to Colt single action armies, generally speaking, you don't think of over 800 foot-pounds of energy out of one of these things. You don't really consider these to be monster revolvers. Uh, you know, cowboy action shooting, just 250 grains of lead just barely making it out of the barrel, shooting pop cans or something, right? That's normally what you think of. Well, prepare to have your whole reality blown, because let me show you what these things can actually do. Now, the first thing you're going to be assuming is, you're not going to get 800 foot-pounds of energy out of a gun like this, because it's going to blow up the gun, right? That's really, that's kind of what everybody thinks about these things, or they're fragile, right? Now, truth be told, this isn't a genuine Colt. It looks like one, but it's not quite. It's a Uberti Cattleman. It is what it is, right? But being a Uberti Cattleman actually has a few benefits over the traditional Colt revolvers. For one thing, a lot of people think these are one-to-one replicas. They're actually not. The cylinders on these things are just a smidgen thicker than on the Colts, especially around the base pin, or not the base pin, but the locking lugs. And that's generally the weak spot on Colt revolvers. So everything I'm about to demonstrate is through a Uberti, not a Colt. But, semantics, right? 800 foot-pounds of energy out of, a single action platform. How do we achieve something like that with this? Now, what this is a 300 grain, and truth be told, these things weighed out generally are around 309 to 312 grains. They're a smidge on the heavy side when you actually weigh the bullet itself. But we'll call it 300 grains. 300 grain wide flat nose gas checked bullets from Montana Bullets. And behind that bullet, I have a concoction of powder. I have 30 grains of 777 3F black powder substitute. Now, if you ever mess with that stuff, it will say right on the bottle, do not use in a cartridge. So, I mean, don't tell anybody, right? Because that's clear. That's what I did. I put it in a cartridge, and it works phenomenally. I believe they have to put a warning label on there just in case you're trying to shoot this stuff out of a black powder revolver. This isn't a black powder revolver. It's meant for smokeless, so these pressures are not going to blow up this gun unless you really try, right? Or if you're about to do what I'm doing and you'd go a little overboard, because that's not all that I have in here. I also have 3.5 grains of W231 ball powder, Winchester 231, making this a duplex load. Duplex meaning there's two different powders in it. And I have that smokeless on the bottom of the case, right? So I put the smokeless in first and filled the rest with the black powder substitute. This also works with genuine black powder. I use 777 just because it's a little hotter. It's about 10 to 15% hotter than true black powder. Hotter meaning, more velocity, right? Which is what I'm trying to achieve with duplexing this load. This load should, in theory, give me around 1,100 feet per second with this 300, actually 309, 312 grain hard cast bullet. And I have a chronograph, and I'm going to show you that I'm not lying about that. I have 6 shots made up of this ammo right here. I'm going to shoot 3 of them through the revolver, and the other 3 through this Rossi 92 24-inch barrel rifle, lever action rifle. So you get to see what it does in the 2 different barrel lengths. So let me get you set up, and let's take a shot with this stuff. So I got the chronograph set up right here. I'm going to take one shot, well actually I'm going to take 2 shots of you looking at me shooting it, so you get a good visual on what it's like to shoot this stuff, because it's pretty fun. And then I'll do 1 shot of you looking at the chronograph, just so you know I'm not trying to fudge these numbers. If I had 2 cameras, I'd be able to set up you looking at me and at the chronograph at the same time. Fortunately, I don't have that kind of equipment on hand, so this will have to do. So first, let's start with me shooting, you looking at me shooting it to get the visual, and then I'll do 1 shot, like I said, of you looking at the chronograph, and then we'll go through all the numbers after that. All right, here we go. We got 1147. 1146. Last one, you looking at the chronograph. 1126. How about that? All right, and let's look at the numbers just to verify. So we have 1126, 1146, and that 1147, like I said. Now, the highest was obviously the 1147, lowest the 1126, with an average of 1139 feet per second out of that 300 plus grain projectile. That's impressive stuff, right? Now, just calculating it using 300 grains, albeit this is usually about 9 to 12 grains heavier than that, you get this, and that is mildly impressive out of something like this. Now, gun's still perfectly functional. Let's see here. Pops right out. That's 1. 2. Pops right out. 3. No sticky extraction. Let me get you a close-up on this stuff. This stuff burns super clean. I don't usually clean this brass very well. I don't have a tumbler or anything, so at the most I'll just dump this stuff in a plastic bag with water and soap in it, just shake it around, let it soak for a bit, and then wipe them off. So, I mean, this stuff I've shot multiple times, reloaded it and shot multiple times, and this is all the dirty it got, I mean, in all that shooting. So very, very clean. Now, let me take a closer look at the primers, because everybody's going to be curious about that. And there are the primers. Now, if you look right on the edge, they're still round. I mean, yeah, this one's a little flatter, but for the most part, they are still round. Like, the primer is not flowing and like flattening, filling that whole bottom like you'll see sometimes. So as far as pressure is concerned, this is probably, maybe 20K, maybe 23K, somewhere around there. I have no way of verifying that. Just from what I'm seeing, nothing is very, concerning to me at the moment. But with that being said, I do believe this is the max load you would want to push this thing. Now, I've worked up to this load, and I have shot some heavier than this in this revolver, but for a safe margin, I think this is about maximum. As a matter of fact, I think I would drop the smokeless to 3 grains and call it good there. That will still give you around an average of 1100 feet per second. You'll get a few under, you'll get a few over. So, yeah. All right, let's see what this big long barrel is going to get us. What kind of velocities? Now, I'm going to take 2 shots with you looking at me, and 1 shot facing the chronograph. Let's get started. We have 1392. Gonna back up just a titch. 1365. Last one facing the chronograph. It's a duplicate 1365. Wow, that's consistent. Now that gives us an energy foot-pound figure of, this right here. And this is an overall of what we got. Now, out of the rifle, it's not actually that impressive compared to what you can do Obviously, this rifle can handle way more than this revolver can, but I figured I'd show you what the round did anyway. That's the numbers we got, and it's no slouch, let me tell you. All in all, very impressive performance out of a single action Army replica, as it may be, platform of Revolver. Now, this isn't a Ruger, otherwise this whole, speech would be null and void, because the Rugers can obviously handle a lot more than what we demonstrated here. But this performance is solid tier 2 Colt territory, which is kinda sketchy in a gun like this. To achieve that same performance using only smokeless powder, it's going to generate a lot higher pressure spike, which is really the thing that kills these guns. The fact that we're using a duplex load with black powder substitute, as it may be, traditional black powder even more safely so, but the fact it's a duplex load allows you to get a much higher velocity out of these rounds without that massive pressure spike. Black powder burns very differently to smokeless. Smokeless is like a punch, where black powder is like a push. So it doesn't generate as much peak pressure, but it pushes it for a lot further of a time. Where smokeless powder just gives it one good punch and then projects it right out the barrel. Two different philosophies, but we used it to our advantage to get the maximum amount of performance out of this Uberti Cattleman as we possibly can. Now, that is just energy foot-pounds, though. And energy foot-pounds, albeit, is, a really good, frankly, dick measuring, schematic. It's a really good ego boost to have a lot of energy foot-pounds. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that effective on a target, though. Like, energy foot-pounds does not translate or correlate directly to effectiveness on your target. A tailored knockout factor is a much better system. And by the way, there's the numbers, tailored knockout factor numbers for you right there for the 2 rounds we shot, or 2 different. They're right there. Just look at those while I yabber. That's a much better representation of what you can expect out of the performance of your, firearms, projectiles, bullet combinations, loads, whatever words you can use. Albeit that's not exactly perfect either. What I like to use is a meat target. Unfortunately, I don't have one here to demonstrate for you, but I do have a few clips of me shooting this at a couple of meat targets, which, if you don't know or haven't watched, is a couple of water bottles with a pair of ribs taped to the front of it. I use the ribs, pork ribs, because it's a good human anatomy. It's got bone and it's got tissue in it, so it's good to simulate flesh, because it is flesh, albeit without its skin, and it's not living anymore, but it's as close as we're going to get. And I use 2 water bottles because you can really see the momentum of the round going through the 2 bottles. If it's just the 1 bottle, you can't get a full representation of what it's doing. It can explode the first bottle really good, but if it doesn't do anything to the second one, the energy is used up very rapidly. If it does moderately good damage to both water bottles, it's carrying that performance throughout. That's why I use 2. I'll insert a few clips here just to show you. So there you go. That is the video. That is the don't underestimate the single action Army platform, albeit it is a replica, and I am not suggesting anybody do this with a Colt, and nor am I actually suggesting anybody do it with this, because I'm not going to be liably responsible for you and your guns and your safety and all that. This is what I do. Replicate at your own risk, and I'm not telling you to do so. But anyways, that's it for now, and I'll catch you next time.